Hello and welcome to another episode of Toothless MMA Radio Series Quick Hitters. I'm your host, John Galloway. Today, as we look at the world of combat sports, I'll be joined by my guest, RJ Clifford, writer researcher for Fox Sports Australia, UFC, radio host at SiriusXM, among other accolades. RJ, how are you today?
Fantastic, John. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Now, RJ, recently in the last couple of shows the UFC have put on, there's some pretty controversial decisions that have come out. And on your show on SiriusXM, The Fight Club, I've heard you mention the topic of open scoring before. Can you take a second to explain to me what open scoring is?
Sure. I mean, it's kind of what it sounds like. In mixed martial arts, boxing, some other combat sports, it's basically the only sports in the world where you don't know the score until the very end. Unlike a baseball game, football game, basketball game, soccer game, whatever, as soon as a point is scored, you know what the score is. In combat sports, however, every time a round is scored, whether it be in martial arts, boxing, or whatever, you don't know what the final score is until the very end. The judges don't reveal their scorecards until the bout is over. I find that very weird, and I don't like it very much. There's so much problems in mixed martial arts judging. This is one of the very few turnkey things that absolutely won't solve the problem. It's not a magic bullet by any means, but it can bring transparency to the issue at hand.
All right, now obviously one of the things we're referring to is the recent fight between Diego Sanchez and Ross Pearson, for one, and to a lesser extent, last weekend's Arlovsky and Schaub fight. Now, how do you think open scoring could have changed the outcome of those fights?
Well, among several benefits, one of them is fighters who feel like they are winning rounds sometimes are not in certain judges' eyes. Every judge views things differently. We like to think there's a very uniform way of scoring mixed martial arts bouts, but every judge is human and a lot of times very, very poor at what they do. So you want to be able to know what judges are looking at. In the case of Ross Pearson and Diego Sanchez, whoever, the judge that scored a 30-27 for Diego, Ross Pearson, at least during that fight, if he would have known that a judge and possibly two were scoring rounds for Diego that he thought he clearly won, he would know he'd have to change his tactics, even though just about every single person watching that fight knew that Ross Pearson was firmly in the driver's seat. Only three people's opinions mattered, and those were the three judges. So if he would have known that what he was doing, although he was landing more punches, he got the only takedown, he got the only knockdown, even though he did that, at least he would know what I'm doing isn't working, at least in the eyes of two judges, and I can change what I'm doing, either pursue takedowns more aggressively, be more aggressive with your striking, whatever he may be. At least it would give him the opportunity. It's not fair, and it's terrible that it had to get to that situation, but at least he would have the information necessary to know, okay, I'm going to have to make a change here because these judges don't know what they're looking at.
Right, and to follow up that point, I'm glad you went in that direction. Now, do you think there needs to be more consistency in how the fights are scored, or do you think that having that uncertainty, for the fans anyway, lends to an added level of excitement?
Well, no poor judging is good in any way, shape, or form. Consistency in judging is going to be one of the hardest things to do because every commission is on its own. Every commission hires its own judges, and there's 49 states where you can hold mixed martial arts, and every single one of them is going to do things their own way. So the unified rules of mixed martial arts are very vague in how you score a mixed martial arts bout. And certain states like California is trying to do a really pushing basically for a policy where more 10-8s are scored, more 10-7s are scored, so they can do things like that. So you're going to want consistency, but the best way to help consistency, I feel a big chunk of it is getting rid of bad judges and making sure good judges get promoted into the bigger bouts. A lot of times, I would say a vast majority of the times a bad decision happens, you kind of just shrug your shoulders and say, wow, bad judging mixed martial arts once again. Very rarely do fans remember the name of the actual judge, remember the face, remember the place where it happened, the commission that hired that judge. And open scoring would help that a little bit. I mean, imagine after the first round of Diego Sanchez, Ross Pearson, everyone in the arena, everyone on television was given the scores of those rounds by the three judges. And the two judges that gave it to Diego Sanchez, they say, Judge, whatever his name is, put a picture of him up on the screen, you know right away, all right, that was terrible, that judge is not nobody's looking at. that would put more pressure on commissions to do their job, which is to protect fighters and make sure fights are judged correctly.
Now, I have to plead ignorance here, and maybe you can fill me in. I know in sports like the NFL, the referees are graded throughout the season on individual bases as well as team basis, and that's how they get playoff games and eventually Super Bowl games based on an ongoing grade throughout the year. Are judges for combat sports graded by the commission or just hired because they have their foot in the door with them?
Well, both, but the second one is very transparent, while the first one is not. Any commissioner or head of a commission in any state will tell you that they do things internally. They constantly reassess how the judges perform, and that's what bases their decisions on what judges get what jobs. They will all say that, but judges that do terrible jobs consistently get more work. Very, very, very rarely will you see a judge, at least publicly, suffer any sort of consequence for doing their job poorly. I mean, think about that. I mean, how many jobs, whether you're a plumber, an insurance salesman, or a realtor, or dog washer, how many times can you be absolutely terrible at your job and there is no consequences? Well, with judging, you can. And open scoring will at least help put the spotlight on the bad judges so the fans can at least put pressure on commissions to say, look, this judge is doing a terrible job. He or she should not be judging at this level. They put him down to amateur, fire him, fine him, send him back to training. Whatever you need to do, there needs to be a spotlight on the bad judges, and open scoring really kind of helps open that door a little bit.
Now, not only you're obviously a fan, but you're also a professional fighter. Now, are you worried that fighters, knowing whether or not they're up or down in a round, might put on, if they're winning, let's just say, would put it on cruise control and just coast to not lose instead of trying to finish and win? Are you worried about that?
Not at all. Fighters oftentimes know that anyway. If a fighter's just getting throttled for 2 rounds, he knows he's down going into the third. There's small discrepancies sometimes. I mean, there's obviously a lot of close rounds where you don't know either way, and both fighters feel like, well, I don't know how this is going. I'm going to have to win the third. But I mean, look at Demetrius Johnson versus John Moraga. He was clearly winning in 4 rounds. He was still going for finishes. I mean, you see that all the time where fighters absolutely know beyond a shadow of a doubt that they're winning rounds, and yet they still keep fighting what they do. But on the flip side, even with close scoring the way it is, you see fighters who are absolutely sure they're winning fights and coast in the third round. So fighters do both anyway, but at least with open scoring, you know they're right. And the other thing is, I mean, what's the most exciting parts of hockey are in the last couple of minutes when a team knows they're down and they pull their goalies, so they have 6 guys on the ice. Or the 2-minute drill in football where a quarterback with 80 yards to go knows he has 70 yards for a touchdown because he's down by 4 points. I mean, those are some of the most exciting moments in sports. And imagine if we had that in mixed martial arts. A fighter knows for a fact he is down 2 rounds to none going into the third and final round. He knows he has to get a submission. He knows he has to get a knockout. He knows he has to do something spectacular. The fans will know that, and that can be part of the sport, that 2-minute drill mixed martial arts that we sort of are kind of robbed from because we don't know the actual score. A lot of times we can be pretty accurate in guessing what fight's one-sided, but we don't know for sure.
Right, that's an angle that I hadn't really thought of or considered going into this conversation with you. I can definitely see where that's going. Now, I mean,
that's a big part of it. I mean, that's what's so fun about sports is the edge. A whole playoff series, right? You do seven games. You do overtime in the 7th game. I mean, that's where all the excitement is. That's where you put all those games or all those rounds or quarters or periods, whatever sport it is. It all builds up to that. I mean, imagine if that's what it was at the championship round of a title fight. You know that it was 2-2 going into that 5th. I mean, those are those amazing moments in sports where several rounds, several games, even a whole season is all built up to a couple minutes.
Right. Yeah, I think it definitely has a place. Now, is this something that you've spearheaded, or is this something that is out there in discussion and maybe in the future up for consideration?
Well, open scoring has been toyed with in boxing at times I don't believe, I can't off the top of my head think of one time it's been used in a regulated mixed martial arts contest, but it's been used in boxing. Texas experimented with it a little bit. I've been vocal about this idea for several years, but it does feel like it's getting a little bit of momentum over the last 6 months to a year or so, as people are starting to get desperate. I mean, there's so many bad decisions, Diego Sanchez, Ross Pearson being the most recent one from Fight Night in Albuquerque, that people are thinking, well, what can we do here? What can be done? Commissions aren't changing anything. The whole theory of, well, MMA just needs better judges is such a vague and grand motion to fix that you have to break it down into smaller parts. Like, what's something that can be done right this second? Well, commissions can immediately, or even the UFC. I mean, the UFC can experiment when they go overseas and fight in countries where they aren't regulated by the government there. They can say, we're going to try to open scoring on these fights. We're going to see how it goes. We're going to experiment with it, see what the fans think, think what the fighters think. I mean, there's that option. And it's slowly gaining a little bit of steam, and I feel as, if judging does not correct itself or see any improvement in that area, it's only going to gain more steam.
Now, what do you think the tipping point is going to be? Is it going to be a company favorite, for lack of a better term? Ronda Rousey being upset by somebody because the judges scored it, against her. What's going to be the tipping point in your eyes that's finally going to say this has to change now?
I don't know if there ever will be one. I mean, we saw very, very high-profile fights where a lot of people thought the score should have gone one way or the other. It wasn't absolute robberies. For instance, Benson Henderson, Gilbert Melendez, a lot of people thought Gilbert won. I actually scored that fight a draw. I thought round 2 with a 10-10. Johnny Hendricks, George St. Pierre, a lot of people thought Hendricks won that fight. I actually scored that for George St. Pierre. So there has been upheaval, but the issue is commissioners don't have to adjust. I mean, the fans can be mad as all hell all they want. They can shake their fists, bring out their pitchforks and torches and march in the street, but the commissions don't change what they do because fans will still watch. So I think if the UFC can set a precedent and at least experiment with open scoring, that's at least something that they can do to do it. Because the desire to see better judging is there, the frustration is there, but there's no motivation on the commission side to change because they're stuck in the way they do things.
Right. Now, while I have you on the phone, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, what's your take on this whole Bellator thing? I know we're changing gears pretty rapidly there, but I want to get you back to work pretty soon. So, in your words, what do you think happened with Bellator here?
Well, this has been brewing for a while, at least a year, according to most journals I've been talking about. And I think Bjorn Rebney, he had an interesting place in mixed martial arts because he did bring up a company from scratch. He found a television partner. He found funding. He cultivated talents. I mean, he did a lot of really good things. I mean, he did better than the IFL, better than Affliction, better than Elite XC, better than all these other promotions that came and went that just burned through money. I mean, Jordan Rebney, he's still a stakeholder in Bellator. He still had a salary. I mean, he made money in mixed martial arts promotion, which is a pretty darn hard thing to do. So I think he accomplished that, but a lot of times in business in general, and mixed martial arts promoting in this case, the guy who can get you off the floor and up and running isn't always the same guy that can take you to the next level. I think that's partly what Viacom thought, is that Bjorn created something that Viacom was willing to spend a lot of money to purchase, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's the guy that can run a company in that environment and take it to where they want to go. Scott Coker is definitely a guy, now that his non-compete with the UFC is out, is in that same boat. I mean, he's ran promotions for 3 decades. He knows the sport. He's got relationships with fighters. He's got relationships with venues. He's got relationships with fighters in other countries. He's a global promoter. So there's a lot of things, a lot of rumors about what happened behind the scenes, whether Bjorn Rebney wasn't that easy to work with, or there was friction or butting heads in the direction they wanted Bellator to go in. I can't speak in confirmation to anything of those, but I do know that Bellator and Viacom specifically, saw something in Scott Coker. We're waiting for his non-compete to come up, and they clearly think he's the guy that can take them to where they want to go.
Now, given his previous relationships with a lot of fighters that are on the UFC roster right now, after UFC bought out Strikeforce, do you think it's gonna maybe possibly raise the level of fighter pay? There's going to be bidding wars. Are these things that we're looking forward to in the future here?
Well, Well, it's already happening, right? I mean, Gilbert Melendez got a ridiculous deal because he threatened to go to Bellator. Bellator offered him a contract, and UFC had to match it. And Bellator has the ability to offer very big things to a guy like Gil that the UFC maybe wouldn't want to. They can guarantee Gilbert main events. They can guarantee him pay-per-view points. They can guarantee him supplemental programming on other Spike shows. The UFC, in a lot of cases, maybe wouldn't offer someone like Gilbert Melendez that, but if they want to keep him, they're going to have to. Hector Lombard got a huge signing bonus and huge contract because the UFC had to lure him away from Bellator. So that mix is already happening. That's already going on. The bidding wars are already ongoing. But now you add the relationship Scott Coker has with all the AKA guys, all the Cesar Gracie guys. Now, most of those guys are all booked under contract. But when guys like Nick and Nate Diaz or Gilbert Melendez or Luke Rockhold, Tim Kennedy, when all these guys' contracts start coming up, if Viacom is willing to put some money down, there's going to be some big bidding wars going on for a lot of guys. Or UFC's going to have to just bite the bullet and say, it's not worth fighting with these guys. Bellator, you can have some top 5 dudes.
Well, hopefully, either way that works out, it's going to be better for the fighters and, hopefully better for the fans as well. I'm going to wrap this up. That's going to be another episode of Toothless MMA Radio Series Quick Hitters. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to today's guest, RJ Clifford, for joining us. For RJ, this is John Galloway, and we are tapping out.